What is up, everyone? So today I want to bring a video on 4 hardy plant species that I use in my aquariums, and I think beginners who are just getting into the plant game themselves should try, just because they look great and they'll give you great success early on. And I just think they're just great plants in general, and I think most people will tell you this. So starting off, the first plant, Hygrophila angustifolia, super hardy plant. It looks a lot better when it's under the water because it kind of like spreads out and obviously looks better, but you get the idea. It's a nice green looking plant. It just grows a ton and will give you a lot of success. Doesn't really need much light or nutrients, etc. And it does well for you. So moving on to the next plant, Crypts. There's many different varieties of Crypts, and that's why I love them so much, because there's so many different types and you can really get fun and wild with them. One thing about these guys is when you first put them into your tank, they'll probably melt back. That's just what Crypts do. For some reason, they just like to melt back. But once they get established, they'll come right back and they'll do fantastic. And of course, they have a big root system on them when they get going, and would prefer a little bit more nutrients at their base, just because they're really big root feeders, but they'll do fine without it. And yeah, I love this plant. You can get darker shades, lighter shades of it, almost like red varieties, so really fun plant. I really enjoy it. Next plant is Rotella. There's lots of different varieties of Rotella. I like to get the Rotella indica or rotundifolia, and it's a really easy plant. It will or rather, it will look better under higher tech conditions, but it will do just fine in low tech conditions, and it'll give you a nice bushy background. I suggest giving it a hard trim so it doesn't get too tall, and then let it bush out. I think it looks best in this way. But yeah, it'll give you success early and often, and looks really good. And the final plant is Sagittaria. This is dwarf sag. There's a couple different varieties of it. There's like a giant sag, and then there's just this dwarf sag. And I really enjoy the dwarf sag. You put it in your tank. It takes a second to establish, because it kind of has these thin little roots and has to get down there. But once it establishes, give it 2 weeks to a month, you'll start getting runners, and it'll go all over the place. And it's just a really good carpeting plant, and stays nice and short with these nice dark leaves. And yeah, it just does really well for you. So I think with all of these plants, and the reason, I could have picked more plants than just these, but these plants pretty much could make your aquarium. So for example, this was your aquarium, this cloth here. You could put the dwarf sag right in the front here. You could put your Rotella like in this area, and then you could put your Hygrophila here, and your Crypts. What I like to do with my Crypts is kind of like what I'm doing with the Rotella here, is it's kind of like a mid-ground type plant, where it kind of gives you a nice contrast between the front and the very back, and because it's just that right height. And also you can play with the colors. You can get a little bit of a darker shade here, because this is a little bit lighter back here, and kind of like really show depth. You can also do that with this plant, or you could even use it in the background and let it get a little higher. But I don't recommend getting it too high, just because it kind of gets scraggly in the back, and I like to give it a hard cut, put it back down, and let it get bushier. So you could either let it grow a little bit lower, or use it in the back as well. But yeah, so I think obviously there's a lot more hardy plants out there, but I think with these 4 plants, you can really make an amazing tank. Of course, there's always like a Nubius, which up here I got a ton of Anubias. It looks fantastic. You know, I pretty much have it like everywhere in this tank you look. There's Anubias. It just draws your eye. You know, back there. It looks good up against the wood and whatnot. So that's for sure another plant you can use. But I think that's for another series, you know, on, you know, hardscape, you know, using plants to soften wood and rocks and whatnot. So I think that's for another video. But I think right here, stick with the basics, start simple if you're new, and by doing so you'll have great success, and you'll be able to move on to harder plants and just be able to challenge yourself more. So I hope that all makes sense. If you like this video, leave a like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out, and later.